All right, everybody, welcome to a special edition of the Occupy Fantasy Football Podcast. You know, if you see one of these podcasts in your podcast feed, something special has happened because we don't do these on a weekly basis anymore. Generally, we're celebrating something. And we have a member this week who took down $200,000 on FanDuel in week 2 in their NFL DFS contest. It's Aaron, aka juniorjr. If you're in our Discord, you know him. If you know him on FanDuel, amich1. Aaron, what's up, man? How you feeling?
Great. I'm feeling good, Brian. Thanks for having me here. And just like you said, and just like I said before we started, I know if I'm talking to you, something good has happened. So this is pretty fun for me to get to do this.
Dude, absolutely, absolutely. So, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to talk to Aaron, get his story, how he plays DFS, what his typical process is like, how his journey is, what has got him to this point. Because if you saw on Twitter, he talked about how he's been grinding for a long time, and these are the types of success stories that we like to see. And then we'll get the story about the sweat, and we'll see if he has any advice for us. So, Aaron, whatever you want to tell us about yourself, personal life, DFS life, whatever you want to tell us. Who are you? Why are you here today? What's going on with you?
Sure. Well, so I mean, I guess I'm a guy who's been playing DFS for 7 years, but I'm not like a professional player or anything even close to that. I'm a casual sort of hobby DFS player with a regular day job and day life and all that kind of stuff. But I am somebody who over the years has kind of evolved from somebody who was just sort of first few years kind of donating money every week and figuring out what was going on to really kind of evolving into being serious about just what I was doing with regards to process and what was my overall goal and outcome, and to try and take some steps to put that into play. So even though I was playing casually, and I plan to continue to play casually going forward, I still was doing it with, some sort of a goal or intention, which was, a couple different things, I guess, that we'll talk about. But it was really just to try and get tickets and to try and take down a big tournament.
So
it's cool that
yeah, so that happened, right? And that's great. And a lot of people don't accomplish their goals, whether it's in life or in DFS, right? But I think having those goals are important. We talk about it obviously in our ultimate guide. But so what were your goals, right? You're not trying to be a pro, but you still have something that you're playing for every single week. So what were the specific goals that you've written down for yourself in DFS?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I've written down any specific goals per se, but I have sort of thought through what my processes have been. And I mean, general goal is obviously to be in the black, but there's a way, I guess, to try to get there. And one of the cool things about DFS is that you have a whole season in certain sports, and you can lose money for a long time and still wind up in the black. And so that's the thing that's kind of fun about it, and it's sort of informed the style of play. Because for me, everybody, I guess one thing I would say is everybody has to figure out what works for them. Like, that's one of the most important things for DFS. For me, I'm not a 150 lineup builder guy. I've played around with them and tried it, but it just doesn't. For me, it just doesn't work with my brain. The style of it. I also don't think you can just play one lineup. So really, in any sport, it's really, really hard to get just everything right. So for me, the sweet spot, for MLB and for NFL is I'm usually playing between 3 and 5 lineups. And I'm trying to enter those in mostly single entries at different price points. And then I'll usually follow those lineups, like just trail them in one of the bigger tournaments, like the $5 tournament, on the big baseball tournament or whatever the big football tournament is for the week.
Sweet. Okay, so you play 3 to 5 lineups. Is it just mostly NFL and MLB that you're playing?
No, anything. Pretty much anything that occupies putting out content for, I'm going to consider playing. And so it started out mainly getting into DFS for me, like most people, was with NFL. And then I pretty quickly, as somebody who had played some pretty serious auction league fantasy baseball for a long time, like MLB DFS was a natural flow over for me, and pretty quickly was like, oh, this is, I like that probably more than anything. Definitely more than season long fantasy baseball, but it kind of gives you the same idea. There's still players that come up, and all the same stuff that happens during season long happens during DFS. You just can capture it in a different way. It's really fun way to play. But yeah, so I guess I just lost my train of thought. 3 to 5 lineups is really kind of what I'm looking at, trying to do. And the reason for that is just because it allows me to kind of look, I guess, in football, I guess since we're in football season, for football, really kind of allows me to look at, okay, what are the highest game in total environments? Is there a game that might be a high total game that doesn't have a high total? And then it gives me some flexibility to kind of have all my eggs in one basket, but not have it be like this big, 150 lineup where there's a player pool and all kinds of other stuff that I have to figure out the allegations and use the computers. And it's a whole nother ball of wax when you get into that stuff. That for me and the amount of time that I have to put into it just doesn't make sense for me to play that way.
That totally makes sense. So for a typical NFL weekend, right, you're building 3 to 6 lineups. How much time does it typically take? What does your process look like? Are you building on Friday nights, Saturdays, Sundays, just Sunday mornings? What's your schedule look like? And then how does that compare to this past weekend when you won the big tournament?
Yeah, so for NFL, and this is sort of, I guess, process that's developed over the last few years, I try to do the same thing every week. And usually it's, on Monday and Tuesday, I'm trying to read somewhere recaps about what happened in the games. I do think that's a really important part about playing DFS, and it actually is a good way to have an advantage of people that are just looking at data, is to really follow along what's actually going on with the teams and the games. And so usually Monday and Tuesday, I'm looking at recaps, taking some time to read it from, whatever's out there about what actually happened. Usually there's discussion going on, on the OF Discord, or you guys are doing a recap pod talking about $1 Million Mission or whatever's going on. Take some time to try to look at that. One other thing that I always do is look at what won. I feel like that's probably like the best 5 minutes of my time I can spend from DFS, especially if I didn't do well or something didn't go the way I did. What won, and why did it, what was the leverage spot, or why did it win, and why was it a unique lineup? That's something that I've learned from what you guys do all the time, is that's a really good way to, because there's an answer to the puzzle usually for every slate. And so if you haven't spent a little bit of time to reverse engineer what happened, it's really hard to think that you can get your brain in the right space that you can also win, So if your goal is to win a big tournament, right, I think you really have to take some time to break down how the pieces of the puzzle fit together and the thought process that goes into it.
Yeah.
So,
that's huge, right? And I think a lot of people don't do that. And even if you're not 100% sure why a lineup won, right, at least seeing what won and just repeatedly doing that every single week get you in the process of figuring out how to build proper tournament lineups for whichever sport that you're playing. So I think that's really important, and it's amazing to hear that you do that. And then towards the end of the week, when do you start playing with lineups and putting them together?
So yeah, you usually during the week, I don't usually. Usually, I guess if I'm looking at the recaps, part of that is also looking at, okay, what's coming up in the week ahead. Is there anything that's unusual? Anything that I think is relevant from a scheduling standpoint? That's one of my kind of, I guess, carryover things from grinding baseball for so long that most people don't think about, is like schedules really matter, and division matchups really matter. And you almost never hear people talking about that in football or baseball, but like, I promise, like, it's really the only thing the teams care about, right? Like for example, like there was a game last week, the San Francisco Seattle game, and it really wasn't like that fantasy relevant, but like there was like zero chance the Seahawks were going to win that game. They were coming off the emotional, like, home Russell Wilson game. Now they have to play a division game. Like they stink. San Francisco lost week 1. They're coming back home for their home opener. Like the odds of the Seahawks winning that game were like 1%, right? So, but you don't hear anybody talking about that kind of stuff in DFS. And it doesn't mean San Francisco is going to cover. It doesn't mean that there's going to be necessarily fantasy gold there, but I do think it's important to realize, like, when I'm looking at lineups and I'm looking at stuff from building, like, I'm not putting any Seahawks in the lineup. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter how they project. Like, they're not probably going to do anything in the game, on either side of the ball. So there is stuff like that that I think it factors into to the football that I'll think at when I'm looking at the schedules. But really, as far as building goes, I don't usually start doing that. I like to see the content that people have gathered at the end of the week. Usually, I'll take a few minutes to kind of look through, like, on Twitter. On Twitter, it gives me fantasy football, like on my whatever the thing is where you swipe over, where it's giving stuff to you based on who you're following and all that. So I do like to look through, and I always like to look and see who other people are talking about a little bit, because usually Occupy Fantasy is doing a pretty good job of identifying who chalk players are too, but I like to look and see who people are talking about, because then I've got to decide, especially if it's running backs, are you going to follow the chalk or are you going to fade it? Because you can't just always fade it, because there's, being contrarian, there's a fine line between being contrarian and being dumb, right? So you have to kind of, there's a lot of nuance that's involved with it. Sometimes there's a lot of good chalk. This last week, when I looked around for a few minutes when I was getting ready to build lineups on the weekend, it seemed like everybody was talking about Leonard Fournette and Darrell Henderson as, like, really popular running backs coming up this weekend. And when I thought about that, I was like, okay, Leonard Fournette's on the road in a division game at home against the Saints. Those two teams hate each other. That's one of the only true home environments in the NFL. I don't really like that game. That's going to be a defensive game, not an offensive game. So Leonard Fournette might do okay, but I don't see that as being like an environment where he's going to have a ceiling game. So for me, I just saw that as bad chalk. And so he was off my list for that reason. And then with Darrell Henderson, it just seems to me like everybody seems so certain that nothing was going to happen with Akers after 1 week, when the coaches weren't really saying the same thing. And so that's just seemed to me like an overreaction based on 1 week. And so that was what got me away from those guys. But it didn't matter really, because the craziest thing about everything that happened is that none of the running backs worked out, and I still won. So it just is so strange. I guess the Miami stack was just so the ceiling on the Miami stack was just so high that nothing else came close to it. That if you didn't have it, it didn't matter if the other spots weren't optimal, at least in that tournament.
Right. So let's talk about the lineup really quickly. Right. So you had real quick. How many entries did you have into this contest?
I had 3.
And they were all from satellite tickets, right? None with your own cash.
Correct. All satellites. All from MLB satellites. And I think they were all $11 satellites that I won them on.
So
$11
into 200K. It's not a bad return on investment.
Yeah.
Right?
I was talking to my wife about it last night. I think it was probably about $100 that I'd invested across satellites to get those 3 tickets. And actually, once I had 3 of them, I was like, I don't know. I'd like to get a couple more, but I'm not sure. I'm in my sweet spot, so I don't know how much more money I necessarily need to invest to get them.
I mean, that's an important thing too, and we talk about this in the Ultimate Guy, right? Where if you win satellite tickets to a future contest, one of the important factors that you have to think about is, can I still build lineups the way I usually build them by the time the tournament comes around? Because if you're used to making 3 to 5 lineups, Aaron, right? But all of a sudden you got 60 tickets, that's a completely different process for you.
It is, and that's actually, it's interesting you brought that up, because it's exactly what happened to me on the tournament last year. Because I think I won 5 tickets last summer, but the tournament wasn't until the end of the football season. And then I picked up 3 more during the football season, so I had 8. And then I was like, well, if I have 8, I may as well have 10. So I bought in 2 more, and I was like, I'm just going to make my 10 lineups. And I went 0 for 10. It happens,
dude. Nothing worse than airballing a ticket day. But listen, you made up for it on Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. So, but lesson learned on that, right? And I was like, okay, well, this time around, there isn't any reason to do anything different. And then with the 3 lineups, It's funny. I asked you in the Discord. I said, would you play three different game environments?
Yeah.
What would you do? And you said, play three different game environments. And then, honestly, I didn't follow your advice because I had decided that I really liked the Tua Waddle Tyreek. Tyreek is just such a ceiling receiver, and Waddle is so dynamic. I just decided I liked that game, and that I thought Andrews had the really high chance to be the top scoring tight end. So I really like that as the bring back. But then after all the talk of like Lamar's number one in the model, Lamar was number one in the model and all this other stuff, it's like, man, if I'm stacked on the other side of that game and Lamar goes off and I don't play it, I don't know. I would rather that game totally bust out and I lose on both the tickets than not have the stack on the Lamar side too and have it go off and I'm sitting there holding Tua and I have like half the right puzzle. So I just decided that I wasn't going to follow that advice. And so I made a Tua stack, and then I made one on the other side that was like a Lamar Bateman, Andrews with a Tyreek bring back. And then the third ticket was a Kyler stack with an Adams bring back that really didn't, was okay, but it wasn't anywhere close, obviously.
Right. Okay, so the Miami stack is the one that gets there. And as we go through Sunday afternoon, right, Tua throws 6 touchdowns. Waddle catches 2. Tyreek catches 2. They're going off. Andrews scores a touchdown. He's one of the top scorers at the position. In the other part of this winning lineup, you also had Amon-Ra St. Brown, Christian Kirk, who are 2 of the top scorers at receiver. You get the Jacksonville defense to put up 21 points or whatever it was on FanDuel. And now you're sitting near the top of this contest. I don't know where you at the top of the contest. And now you got 2 4 p.m. running backs to close it out. So in our Discord on Sunday afternoon, you say you've been sweating this for at least 3 hours. It's very rare to be at the top of a contest that early and hold on for that long. So talk to me about that game goes off. You're sitting at the top. What's this afternoon like?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience to say the least. I have had one other time where I won 10,000 last year on the $25 single entry tournament last year, where the same thing happened. And in that lineup, I didn't have any late players. I was in first by a lot, and I held on and won. And I know that's super unusual. So when this happened again, I was just like, man, this is just not like, it was pretty unreal because, I have a 9-year-old that had a soccer game that started at 1:30. So I watched kickoff and left, went and watched the soccer game and came back to the house at about 3:00 and opened my phone and I had taken a gander at the scores on my phone, but I hadn't opened up the app on FanDuel until about 3:00, which is super unusual for me to usually I don't have anything going on. I'm watching it. It just so happened.
Right.
I kind of had an idea that there was some scoring in the game, but I didn't really know what was going on until about 3:00. I was able to watch the last hour of the 1 p.m. games, and by 4:00, I was like, I can't move the seat on the couch. Basically, that's my one superstition. And my other superstition is like, unless I know it's over, I did actually break my rule because I knew it was over. But I don't post anything in Discord. I don't talk about it. I don't text my friends. I don't tell my wife. I don't say anything about anything that's going on with DFS until it's over, because that's like the biggest jinx there is, right?
Dude,
especially after the first quarter or whatever. So
right. I mean, you posted the screenshot, right? You posted the screenshot before the 4:00 games were over, and everyone in Discord's like, dude, don't post it this early. But you knew at that point that you had won. So I guess the question that I'm asking is, at what point did you know that, okay, I'm going to win 200K?
So that's a really good question, because at about 6:00, the scores hadn't moved in a long time in that tournament. Like my score had barely budged, but everybody that was behind me hadn't moved either, and I still had a 20-point lead. So I was like, okay. I looked at the 5 people that were closest to me to see who they had, and like, there was people that still had players going, but the only buddy that was anywhere close to me, they all also had Lamar Jacobs.
Oh, yeah.
So like, I knew I had them all blocked. And so I was able to just kind of very quickly look at like the 8 or 9 lineups that were closest to me and realize that none of them were going to catch me, and there wasn't anybody else that had a game environment. Like I could survive a combo touchdown, right? Which is really unusual when there's like you're to be that far ahead in the tournament. You're like a quarterback and a wide receiver can have a combo touchdown, and I'm still good.
Yeah,
like it could be somebody that's within that immediate range of taking me down, and that's not even going to be enough to take me down. And none of those people have that combo. So everybody that's behind me, if there would have to be two combo wide receiver quarterback touchdowns in the last 2 minutes of one of these games that were all dying out. I was like, this is not gonna, this is unbelievable. It was like, I'm originally a Seattle guy. I'm a big Seahawks and Mariners fan, and it's just like when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, it was like so anticlimactic. Like my friends were leaving early in like the third quarter. I'm like, well, where is everybody going? This is like, but it was almost that same kind of feeling that was like, I can't believe that this happened, and I can't believe that it's like it's not a stat correction or whatever. It was just
no competition.
No, and like Connor got hurt, right? And then it's like, oh man, there that goes. It's like, I don't know if I even want to watch it. And it's like, it's like, okay, what are we doing for dinner? It's like I start doing all the other routines, and it's like, well, now I'm going to sit back down and just watch the game, right back in the same spot, which is what I did. So.
Attaboy. 200K richer now. So happy for you, right? Because you've been around for so long, you've been grinding this for so long. So I appreciate you joining. We'll let you get out of here in a second. 2 final questions for you, Aaron. Any plans for the 200K that you're willing to share? Anything you have in mind that you would use it?
No, put it somewhere where it's going to make some money for me. I think it's just kind of got to go all good off of the FanDuel. It's already off the FanDuel, and we'll go somewhere to a safer environment. But no concrete plans. But a lot of breathing room that was not there before. So
that's huge. That's huge.
It's not a bad thing.
Are you gonna keep a little extra on? I guess the question, a lot of people hit big like this, and some people just say, I'm going to continue playing the same way. Some people say, I'm going to play a lot more. How are you going to, the rest of this NFL season, what are your plans for play?
Well, my plans for play, I think, are going to try to get in some more tickets to any of these other big contests. So I'll use that similar strategy of playing small fields, single entry tournaments to look for the biggest tickets that I can find for bigger events down the road. I haven't decided if I'm going to change how much I play. I did leave a little bit more of a budget in my account than I would have had otherwise. But I'm also, I do think it's important to mention how much money management matters. I mean, I had a stretch in baseball this year that was one of the worst ones I'd ever had before I turned it around and had a really great August and September has been ridiculous too. But I was down and I was losing a lot and losing, more than, most people could probably handle, not necessarily in amount of money per day, but in numbers of days in a row, sure. Right? I was keeping to my budget, but I was losing, and I was losing probably five or 6 days a week, right? Which is not fun, and getting real close, but just whatever reason, just not. But baseball's hard, and sometimes it takes a while for it all to click. But eventually, I wound up. I had a 5-figure win in baseball and had a whole bunch of really good stuff happen. But had I not had a plan and had I not stuck to the bankroll management when I was down, and we're talking about getting into being, 40 out of 45 days of losing is not very fun, right? And then you start to think that it's never gonna turn, but the money management is what allows you to kind of push through that. And really, you've talked about the struggles and the weird stuff that happens with DSS as far as you can be doing a lot of stuff right and still lose for a long time. So I try to remember that. I'm trying to remember that as I go into what goes on to the rest of this season. At the same time, I feel really good about the process and everything that I'm doing, so I don't want to sell myself short as far as that goes either.
Sure.
So
okay,
I'm trying to find where the middle ground is between those two things, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, those are all key points. Very, very, very important. And I will let you get out of here, but I do want to ask you these questions because everyone hears what are these pros advice? What are these pros saying? But you're an everyday guy who won this money. So I want to answer these two questions in one sentence, if you can. What is your opinion, the best way to use Occupy Fantasy to help you win in DFS? And then general DFS advice. What's the best piece of DFS advice you can give?
So I guess I'll start with the second question first. The most best general DFS advice that I could give to everybody is, I think you got to really realize that in 2022, there has just never been more noise out there than there is right now. Like everybody's just bombarded with content and short form and long form video and print, and there's never been more ways to consume information about DFS or sports in general. And I think it's really important to choose your sources wisely and cut out all of the noise, as much of the noise as possible, because there really is information paralysis. Really is a thing. You can choke yourself by consuming too much content, right? I mean, if you were to read every article that was out last weekend, right, you would think that you have to be insane to fade Saquon Barkley. I didn't have him in any of my lineups this week, but why? Because I knew, everybody was counting on him having a ceiling game. I just need him not to have a ceiling game, and I should have leverage on a whole lot of people that are going to play Saquon, because you really couldn't open any content last weekend really without hearing somebody talk about Saquon. So, I guess it's just trying to be ahead of the curve. And so I guess that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's just it's good to know what other people are talking about, but you really need to limit your sources of information if you want to be successful.
Very smart.
And then I think the number one way that I've used Occupy Fantasy to be successful is really, I think it's really just all of the content that I've consumed here over the years, and having understanding of what I need to do to win, right? How do I apply leverage? How do I build a unique lineup? How do I be contrarian without being dumb, and use the Occupy model as like the basis for all of that stuff. So what I do is, I talked a little bit, I guess, about my process during the week, but I'll read the content that's up on the site. I'll think about what I want to think about with regards to the game, and then I'm looking at whether or not the model verifies what I'm saying or doesn't verify. So if, like, for example, I'm trying to think of an example of it, but like every week, like I guess last weekend, one of the ideas I had was like as the high game environment was that Detroit Washington game. It was like, TJ Hawkinson might be an interesting tight end that nobody's really talking about. And then I like looked him up and like, I don't even think he was in the model, or he was like way down at the bottom. I was like, actually that. Yeah. So like, I really do like to use the model as like, I don't want to call it a tiebreaker, but like that final filter of information as far as like, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? And usually the model, like, it doesn't give you all the answers, but it is really, really good. Best I've ever seen at telling you whether something is a good idea or a bad idea. So that's pretty much how I use it.
Cool.
Aaron. It's kind of like my final filter, right? Because you can't just use the projections. You gotta figure out how you're gonna combine it all together.
Right. You can't use one number to tell you everything. But if you use that, and again, if you have a sound process and you incorporate that into your process, you're certainly going to be better off than not. So, Aaron, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join. I know this is an exciting time for you. It's an exciting time for us. We love one of the reasons we love doing this is because we love stories like this. And when we saw the screenshot in Discord for 200K for a good guy who's been around for a while, one of our longest standing members. I mean, it was just incredible to see. So just from me to you, I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. Just super pumped that you did that.
Thanks, man. Well, thank you. Thanks for teaching me how to build. I know I've said that more than once, but this has been pretty unbelievable 48 hours. And, hopefully, really, after I digest this all, I'm sure I'll be ready to get back up on the horse and try and figure out how I can actually get the $1 million if one of my running backs doesn't get injured. that nobody has when I'm already in the lead.
Oh man, yeah. Well,
That's
this Sunday,
I
you can do
guess
it.
that's like, yeah, exactly.
So,
Gives me something else to go for. So hopefully next time we talk, there'll be another comma in there, and I'll be really happy.
you're not coming back unless there's another comma. So make sure it's the million.
Okay. Perfect.
Cool. Aaron, appreciate it, buddy.
All right, man.
Good work.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for being on. For those of you still listening, make sure you subscribe. We don't do these podcasts very often, but you can subscribe in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. The video version is posted there. If you're watching the video version, what's up? Subscribe on YouTube for all of our other content. And OccupyFantasy.com is where you can become a member and become a part of the Occupy Fantasy community. Thanks for listening.